Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, the Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union, and welcome to another episode of Live Free TV. Maybe some of you remember that movie with Will Smith before he kind of went insane, slapping people at the Academy Awards. It was called Enemy of the State. It was kind of interesting because it was about the surveillance state and how, government assets and resources, mainly the national NSA, could be used to track you and find you. All of your movements, they could get into your accounts. But we're going to talk to someone today that maybe was a real life, person that told us about this coming about. And that's Russ Tice. Russ Tice is a former intelligence analyst for the United States Air Force. He was in the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Agency, NSA. In December of 2005, Tice helped spark a national controversy over claims that the NSA and the DIA were engaged in unlawful and unconstitutional wiretaps on American citizens. He later admitted that he was one of the sources for the 2005 New York Times reporting on wiretapping activities. After speaking publicly about the need for legislation to protect whistleblowers, Tice received national attention as an NSA whistleblower in May of 2005. He was dismissed by the NSA in May of 2005, just days after publicly urging Congress to pass stronger protections for federal intelligence agencies. Russ, thanks for joining us here on Live Free TV.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about this. I mean, what got you started in the intelligence agencies first and foremost, and you started with your time in the United States Air Force?
Well, I got out of college and I wanted to be an F-15 pilot, so I joined up with the Air Force. But I was too big and ugly to fly an F-15, and apparently
you should have been a paratrooper like me. I mean, you can jump out of the airplane. We love them ugly.
It's okay to be big and ugly as a paratrooper.
Yeah.
But then I found out I was also a little bit colorblind between reds and greens, so they weren't going to let me fly at all in the Air Force. So I was pretty upset. So they said, you know what, as a consolation prize, we'll let you go in the intelligence service. So that's how I ended up in intelligence, because they wouldn't let me fly an F-15.
How many years did you spend in the Air Force before you transitioned over to the civilian side of the intelligence agencies?
5 years.
Okay. So were you recruited out of the Air Force, or was this just a logical transition that you undertook?
Oh, well, in the Air Force, I was overseas. I probably shouldn't say where, but I was overseas. I was like in Asia, working the collection angle of this. And then there was one of our NSA reps was there with us. He had to leave, and then I just started also doing an analytical role. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I decided to get out of the Air Force, and NSA said, we want to hire you, and we're going to send you to England. I would have done the same exact job I was doing in Asia, in England, but then the certain budget cuts came out, and they said they couldn't hire anybody. So then I became a contractor at NSA. And then, I banged around to a couple different contracts with NSA. And then ultimately, I worked an intel contract with the department or the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And then, and also with another with the Air Force, with working with NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, because I was basically a space specialist. Mm-hmm. So a technical analyst. Working space issues. So at that time, about a year earlier, I put in an application with the Department of the Navy, and I get a call when I was a contractor, said, hey, we want to give you a job. And that was with the Naval Information Warfare Activity, mm-hmm. NIWA, which has changed names, 2 or 3 names now, which works actually closely with the Naval Intelligence Office, but they don't really answer to naval intelligence. They answer directly to the chief of naval operations in the Pentagon, and also at Fort Meade. I had an office in Suitland, Maryland, and one at Fort Meade, Maryland. So we worked closely with NSA, and I was the liaison to NSA when I was there. Then ultimately, I got a promotion and I got pulled into DIA at Bowling Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working there. And then I started working basically what they call SAP programs, special access programs, which are a much higher level than just TSSCI. As a matter of fact, that's as high as you go in the intel world.
Yeah.
And I've specialized in those. I was their technical specialist for space. And then from there, I transitioned back to NSA. I was also the liaison from DIA to NSA. And I met a young lady at NSA and decided I was going to marry her. So I moved back to NSA proper and became an NSA employee. And that's the whole transition of my after college career.
So how many years in total did you serve in the intelligence field from the United States Air Force through your time with the NSA?
Well, it was about 20. And then after NSA fired me, they forgot to take my secret clearance away. They took all my super duper clearances, but they forgot my little secret clearance. So I started working for the Army. You
finally wised up. You wised up, and you came.
So I basically worked for all the services. Yeah. So I started working for you guys, and I was space support for you guys in the field. So I try to keep you guys alive from things that you didn't know could kill you. And so that was my job there. And I worked for, I guess, 4 years there. And as soon as NSA found out that I was working for the Department of the Army, I was basically right outside of the Pentagon in Crystal City. I spent a lot of time in the Pentagon with the Army, but the Army kept wanting me to get my TSSCI back again. I kept telling them, I say, look, the NSA, if they find out, they're not going to be happy. And they said, oh, no, that's years ago. They're not going to do that. But of course, as soon as NSA found out that I was working for the Army, even with the secret clearance, they had me fired from the Army job. So that's so I guess 24, 25 total years working directly in intelligence.
So without a doubt, you have an established expertise in the field of the intelligence agency. So let's talk about what was it that caused such an angst for the National Security Agency, the NSA, that caused you to be terminated. What did you reveal about what some of the practices they were doing that, as you said, were unconstitutional?
Well, when we were fighting the last war with Iraq, I was working hellacious hours at NSA, and then it sort of waned once the statue came down at the square there in Baghdad, and I told my boss, when I'm working, I basically, if I come across some things, I have a to-do list, and I said if I could put it off, I put it off, and so I put a lot of things off while I'm fighting the war. And then finally, the war is pretty much over. And so I said, it's time to go back to the to-do list. So one of the things on my list was I made during the war, I made a call to someone when I was involved with an operation that was with the war, and I needed some support. And it was space oriented, and it was over a secure line, and I needed to make sure that I could have. I got to be careful of the wording. Certain access with the satellite capabilities. Yeah. And they said, I said, well, we also have our own people that are involved that might be using our own military. Matter of fact, if you were in the field, there are things that are going on that may be involved in. And they said, well, we're collecting some of our own assets. And it's 24/7. And I was like, really? Because I wanted to make sure I didn't step on anyone's feet.
Yeah.
And then I find out that we are monitoring, like General Shinseki, we're monitoring Colin Powell, the Secretary of State at the time. So we're monitoring all these people via satellite capabilities 24/7. And I'm like, well, why on earth would we be doing that? And we're not talking just a military related phone call. We're talking about these guys talking to their family back home and everything else. And then I put that on my tag. This is something I need to look into. Mm-hmm. And then, when I called back to that same unit, that I basically was going to try to write them up for an accommodation because they did help out with what I needed, and I was real curious about what was going on, and then I'm finding out it's much worse. That they were going after all kinds of officials, and then I found out they were going after the Red Cross, and they were going after banking organizations, and they were going after law firms and things of that nature. And that was with satellites, and they were also going after journalists and news organizations, the press. So, with this, I'm a little bit concerned. And when I made that phone call, I made sure it wasn't on my gray line. A gray line is a super secure phone line. Mm-hmm. I went to an area where I knew the lines were hot because I knew this could be contentious. And when I made that last phone call, but the security group at NSA, they're called Q Group now, but it used to be M Group, but since they changed their names. But they must have been listening. They must have been monitoring those gray lines. So immediately I get called in, get this, for an emergency psychological evaluation. And I'm like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
So they called me in for a psych eval. I had one 9 months earlier and passed with flying colors, except they said I was sort of a black and white thinker and I had a dominant personality. Well, I'm kind of guilty on that. Yeah. But so they called me in for an emergency psych eval, and they declare me to be nuts. And I'm like, so basically what they're doing now, this is retaliation. They're telling me, this is Soviet style retaliation, where they're telling me, all right, and they put me in the motor pool of all things to maintain vehicles, which is a whole bunch at NSA. So what they're doing is basically telling me, all right, this is your punishment for what you've learned on your own. Keep your mouth shut. We'll let you have your job back, and pay penance and show some remorse. I guess they wanted me to cower like a little church mouse or something in the corner, and then we'll basically let you have your job back. Well, that's just not my personality. I'm not going to do that. So we had it on from there, and we battled back and forth until what I did is I contacted some other folks at NSA because remember I just told you my background. I had contacts all over the intelligence service because I've been all over the place with all the different services, the different intel. I'd spent a lot of time at CIA and NRO, so I knew all those guys, and I had contacts all over the place. So I contacted the folks that I knew at NSA would, if I thought we're dealing with a landline, because remember I'm dealing with satellites. Now, what about most of the communications in the United States? People don't realize this are done via fiber optics. Not by satellite. Satellite communications is expensive. Fiber optics is where most of it's at. So the guys that I knew that dealt with fiber optics, I kind of contacted them. They got back to me, and we finally got together and we compared notes and realized that NSA was literally spying on every domestic communication in this country. At that time, it was mostly, unless you were targeted, it was the metadata. The metadata is mainly the transfer of information, who's calling, what the numbers are, how long is the conversation, that sort of thing. Later on, that once they opened up that facility in Bluffdale, Utah, then it became every communication of every U.S. citizen domestically, and it didn't matter whether you're in Texas and you're calling Aunt Molly in Minnesota or something. Every single domestic communication NSA was collecting and warehousing, and most likely still is to this day. So that's how bad it was. And then we were bringing out some tangible notes, and I was finding out some of the people that were being for instance, and it was law firms, and it was interestingly enough. The whole bunch of Southern California numbers. I'm thinking these must be like movie stars or something. I'm thinking, heck, if I pick out the right number, I could talk to Jennifer Aniston or something. But we knew not to do that because people like that, are weary of crank calls.
Now, the interesting thing is that what you uncovered, And it's kind of funny. Like I said, we started out my little monologue talking about that movie Enemy of the State, which is really kind of what you are, adhering to is these classified, satellite systems being turned against innocent everyday Americans. You're the precursor to what comes along with the Patriot Act and all of the concerns that people had with the Patriot Act. How did you feel when you heard people all of a sudden later, talking about metadata? And I remember the NSA chief that was sitting there during a Senate hearing, and he was asked about conducting surveillance on the American people. And I think his answer was not intentionally. Do you feel kind of vindicated because what you discovered back in 2004, 2005?
Well, that was Clapper. That did that.
Clapper.
Yeah, and I knew Clapper from back in the day when he was the director of basically the collection we do via optical satellites, and he was not a well-liked person back then either. But we got to remember, up until that point, when I finally came out, and it became known that I was a source for the New York Times article about the NSA spying on everybody, they immediately came after me. I'm talking about the liberal. Actually, it was at that time. Remember, George W. Bush was the president.
Yeah,
So I've got Fox News coming after me. For my throat. I've got. And I'm going on shows like MSDNC, whatever I call it, MSDNC, and CNN because they want they want to just put it to they're out to make George W. Bush look bad. So
it became a political topic, a political hot potato. But we should have all been concerned about what was happening. And that, we did have big government intrusion into our lives. And again, remember that the Patriot Act came out of the Bush administration as a response to 9/11. And I think a lot of people were concerned about how that could morph and become something greater. And the next thing you know, look at what was happening with Donald Trump, where during the Obama administration, they are conducting surveillance against him and his campaign and others.
Well, this is the deep state, and they don't care whether they're working with the Democrats or the Republicans. That people that have that dual-minded, you must hate one or the other concept. You have to get away from that, because at the time, one of the names that I found, and I'm looking at this paperwork, and the information is coming from burn bags, and they're doing this collection where they're targeting these phone numbers, and these phone numbers would be not just the person themselves; it would be their wife or spouse. It would be their if it's their congressman, it would be their little offices back home, wherever state they're from. It would be if they have elder children, their children. It would be a litany of phone numbers for each target. So I'm going over some of this information with the guys that are literally involved in the program at NSA. And we come across this name, and this was in probably the summer of 2004. And it's some guy I've never heard about. I'm a conservative Republican at the time. And it's this guy, Barack Obama. And I'm like, who's this guy? I don't know. Oh, look him up, right? So he's running he won his primary in Illinois. And
senator race.
And he was about to, then he won, of course, he became a senator.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of moved on to bigger things after that, as we might think.
Yeah.
But as I know now that NSA is going after him too. By the way, they're going after all the members of the Supreme Court and the members of the FISA court. So NSA is going after everybody of importance. They're going after every single member of the judiciary committees and the intelligence committees in Congress, all of them, as well as the senior leadership in Congress.
So, Russ, what are the American people supposed to think about the intelligence agencies here in the United States of America if they are that rogue that they have become their own separate branch of government and they're turning their assets against people in the other branches of government? I mean, how do we fix this? How can this be rectified?
Well, Alan, when we both went in the military, we raised our hand and we said, to defend our country against both enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, I always thought about that when you're young. What are they talking about? Domestic enemies? And then I find out that working at NSA and working at DIA, I'm literally I'm a cog in the machine of an agency that is an enemy of the United States, our Constitution. And, it's horrifying that you realize that you're just a piece of that machinery. Ultimately, I knew that I knew that I couldn't go to General Hayden, because he was obviously in it. I didn't know it went as far up as, I didn't know that President W. Bush knew, but I knew not to go to our IG because they weren't even cleared for these programs, because these programs were using the SAP protection capabilities of separate security to protect, the NSA from. Remember, they're trying to keep it secret. They're doing all the targeting and after hours when most of the people at NSA are gone. So that's, I knew I had to go somewhere else. I kind of went to the DODIG with this nonsense about this, because earlier at DIA, I suspect that young lady might have been spying for China, and they blew me off. And that's a whole nother story, by the way, that's really interesting. But they made it think like I was obsessed with this girl, and I was not, of course. Then when I got back to NSA, the two FBI agents in charge of Asian spying, both of them were sleeping with a Chinese spy. But
just the same as a congressman from California.
Yeah, the same. And
Fang.
So yeah, the same. Our lovely FBI, as competent as they are. But then I come to find out. So President, former President Obama, before Obama becomes president, he's saying that he's going to stop all these abuses. Remember, it's already out in the press now, and I've already done all these TV programs with all the liberal side, so they're bringing on the conservative guy to basically, give a dirty nose to the Republicans. Basically, is their idea.
Oh yeah, you're a weapon.
So of course, and they loved it then. They thought that was great then. And then Obama's saying, all right, I'm going to stop this stuff that's happening. I'm going to make sure. Remember, I already know he's being wiretapped by everything he says is being wiretapped by NSA. So he says he's going to stop all the abuses in the intelligence community. He's going to stop the national security letters from the FBI. He's going to clean it all up. So I decided, you know what? Even though I'm a conservative, I know he's a liberal. I can put up with another liberal in office as long as he's going to clean up the intelligence service. So I actually voted for the first time around for President Obama. And what does he do once he gets in office? He doubles and triples down on everything that's going on.
Well, it's the power. Now, all of a sudden, he realizes the power that he has and how he can wield it against his political opposition. And so, I want to close by this. You've been inside this beast. You know what this issue is. You have been vindicated because this is now out as public knowledge. How do we fix it? How do we, the deep, people call it the deep state. I call it the bureaucratic administrative state, but especially the intelligence agencies, which to me, it seems that they wield far more power, much power than they really should.
Well, think about it. The 702 provision comes up in Congress, and they pass it over and over and over again. Now, not only is this power oriented, but I wonder how many of these people are being blackmailed by NSA. Mm-hmm. Because some of the folks in Congress may have had some skeletons in their closet. I wonder the same thing with President Obama. What did they get on him that made him turn around so quickly and decide he would give them anything they wanted? As far as I'm concerned, we need someone in office who cannot be bought and cannot, with a carrot and they cannot be blackmailed with a stick. Right now, the only guy I know of is President Trump, who basically everyone knows his indiscretions of the past, and he's been forgiven because he's lived in a glass house all his life, mm-hmm. and he's made his own wealth. They can't buy him off. So I'm fully in the Trump camp, but what else needs to be done is we need to hold accountable people like General Hayden and General Alexander, who ran NSA and were involved in all of this stuff. Remember, this was a crime then. It still is a crime that they're doing this. They need to be held accountable. I think it's like $5,000 fine and 5 years in prison for one single violation, and we've got hundreds of millions of them. Yeah. So, as far as I'm concerned, we have to, unless we hold these people accountable for what they've done and for Clapper lying to Congress. I mean, look what they're Mr. Manafort and President Trump's
Peter Navarro,
they're tossing them in jail because of the January 6th nonsense. So we need to haul them into court. We need to have a trial, come up with the true information that proves that they did this. I don't think there's an expiration date on this, and we need to put them in jail for the crimes they've committed because they are criminals. Now, once you put these criminals in jail, and I believe Hayden and Alexander and Clapper and all the lot of them are criminals, and they need to be in jail with which we do with criminals. Then the next guy that comes along goes, hey, if I do this and break the law, violate the Constitution and NSA's own regulations, use at 18, maybe I'll go to jail. Until you hold people accountable, and they've never been held accountable, and Congress keeps just stamping their tickets like for whatever reason, blackmail, whatever. Until we hold them accountable, this is going to continue to happen behind the scenes for Lord knows how long, until we lose our republic and we become a total totalitarian police state.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were in the military. We know about the East German Stasi police and, of course, the KGB and all of that. It just seems that we're descending into that. Russ Tice, how can people follow you and stay in touch with you? And have you written a book, or are there any plans of writing a book?
Well, that's another interesting story. I was looking at maybe doing a book, and NSA let me sort of quietly know that they considered anything I write to be a violation of my agreement that I would not release classified information, and a book would put me in jail. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to say anything that I know is classified, but I did go to the big, I think it was Random House, their offices in New York, and they wanted to do a book, and they're gung ho, and everything's and they even said, don't even talk to any other publisher. We're going to do a book, and everything was going fine. And then all of a sudden, I think they got a visit from the folks in the black suits, and and then after that, I heard nothing. I finally got in touch with them, and they said, "Well, we've decided to go another direction." And I said, the FBI in black suits showed up, didn't they? He goes, "Well, we're not going to talk about that." But so they got the scare tactics, and so there's no book. Maybe under President Trump, he'd let me write a book. I don't know. But right now, I'm just sort of, I'm hanging loose. I don't have any particular, web page or anything like that. But I'm more than willing to talk. I was talking with Lou Dobbs quite exclusively for
the late
last 2.5 years. Yeah. We lost Lou Dobbs about a month and a half ago, which was sad. So I'm willing to chat to folks that want to hear the story and get the word out that we need to save our republic.
Well, I want to thank you so very much, Russ, for joining us here at Live Free TV, because we cannot expect, as citizens of the United States of America, a constitutional republic, to live free if we know that we have government agencies that are turning their assets and resources against us to invade the privacy of our lives. And this is a huge issue and a huge concern for us to protect our individual rights, freedoms, and liberties. So, Russ Tice, thank you so very much for joining us on this episode of the Live Free TV. And ladies and gentlemen, if you like this episode, please click the like button, share it with others. And until next time, live free.